Hey, happy Tuesday and welcome to episode 11 of Pathfinder. Today we're tackling the topic of space junk, and we could not have found a better guest if we tried. Dr. Moriba Jah is the chief scientist and co-founder of Privateer, which calls itself a data and intelligence platform empowering the future of space sustainability. Jah is also an astrodynamicist, space environmentalist, and associate professor of aerospace engineering and engineering mechanics at the University of Austin, Texas. Okay. At the highest of levels, you could describe Moriba's life work as studying and predicting the motion of space objects or objects in space to make space more safe, secure, and sustainable. We will unpack what exactly that means and a lot more. But first, let's hear a word from today's sponsor. Our reliance on satellites for navigation, communications, commerce, and intelligence has grown exponentially in the new space economy. Unfortunately, the risks have grown as well, and the need to prioritize cybersecurity around space assets is critical. SpiderOak Mission Systems provides space cybersecurity products for military, commercial, and civilian operators. Their Orbit Secure solution is the first to deliver zero-trust security to zero-gravity environments, protecting space communication, command, control, data transmission, storage, and integrity at the data level. To learn more about Orbit Secure, check out their website at spideroak-ms.com. Now, let's dive into Pathfinder 11 with Moriba Jah. Moriba, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So we have talked once before in the fall, but that was a while ago and a lot has happened. So I'm really looking forward to this. I will say though, that last time we had talked, I think about a week before, there had been the anti-satellite test with Cosmos 1408. And now we're talking in the wake of the Long March stage falling over Malaysia and Indonesia, and then SpaceX debris having been found in Australia. I wish we had better, more optimistic precursors to our conversations.
No, I'm with you, and I wish I could have said that I would have never predicted this happening, but of course I've been predicting that this exact scenario it would be unfolding.
Yeah, and I'm excited to get into discussion of predictions and risk and whatnot. And I do think I should note, I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer. I think that we'll have some we'll have some reasons to be optimistic at certain points in this conversation, and hope springs eternal. So
yep,
I have just provided, your primary titles, I suppose, but for those in our audience who aren't familiar, could you just touch on some experiences, positions, and anything on your resume that didn't just jump out that I didn't just say?
Yeah, I mean, so aside from the stuff that I'm doing at UT Austin and with Privateer, I'm also an affiliate faculty member with MIT, with our space-enabled group out of the MIT Media Lab. I'm also a non-resident fellow of the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research. I'm also a non-resident fellow of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace on a space project. I'm a member of the National Academy of Sciences Committee on International Security and Arms Control, where we do a lot of bilateral things, U.S. Russia, U.S. China, U.S. India type stuff. I chair a couple of activities for NATO Science and Technology Organization, regarding space domain awareness and these sorts of things. And then, I'm also a global Scot, so the Scottish government basically trusts me to inform them about space sustainability and how they're going to be growing in space, and other countries calling me to do that sort of stuff as well. So, yeah, I guess that's...
You stay busy. I don't know where you find the time to sleep, but you're also an avid runner, right?
Well, so here's the thing, man. It's like it's funny because I think that I am a runner, but people that are diehard runners don't consider me one, because they're like, oh, well, you only kind of do 5K a day and maybe 10K. That's not enough or whatever. And I try to do 5 to 10K a day is my thing.
Gotcha. Well, as a reformed diehard runner, I think that's quite enough. And I should mention we're both in Austin, and one day we'll pass each other on the trail.
Yeah, that'd be awesome,
Look
man.
forward to that, the fateful day. So the term astrodynamicist, it's probably familiar to half of our listeners, I would say, but can you define that for us and maybe walk us through a day in the life?
Yeah. I mean, I think the simplest way to think of astrodynamics is it's the science that studies why and how things move in space. That simple. Whether the thing moving is a planet, an asteroid, a piece of space debris, a rocket body, if it's something in space and it's moving, what's causing it to move that way? How is it moving? And where is the thing going to go? That is really what astrodynamics is all about. And in terms of a day in the life of an astrodynamicist, I think, if you're working for a space company, like SpaceX or Lockheed Martin or whatever, it's really about planning trajectories. And if something is operating, then it's making sure that the satellite or satellites are on the right path, just like, and that's really like an orbit determination team and that sort of stuff that is really all about saying, okay, here's the intended pathway that we want for our satellite or all our satellites. We're collecting measurements. Where are we at with regard to our ideal path? And if we're off, then we need to make like course corrections and that sort of stuff. So that's just kind of the way that would be good for people to think about it.
Yeah. Okay. And then another title that you have is space environmentalist. And I think that is fascinating because, environmentalism, like the comments for the history of space, spacefaring Earth, might have been an afterthought for a few decades, but, it's now a obviously very important and rapidly growing field. So can you walk us through, in your own words, what that looks like, space environmentalist?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about this is that I came up with the term some years ago, and really, I think I started coming up with this term back in like 2015. I went with my son Denali to Alaska to visit a friend, and just had kind of a very deep kind of spiritual epiphany that I think came together with my experience on Maui, working for the Air Force Research Lab, looking through the telescope, seeing all the space garbage around Earth, and then on Maui, seeing that compared and contrasted with landfills, single-use plastics, what we're doing to the ocean. And so this idea of space environmentalism is to say, people think, oh, space, it's some other place, it's not here, kind of who cares, space is big. And it's like, that's what we thought about the oceans. Oh, the ocean's big, so who cares, and that sort of stuff. And it's really looking at outer space as a finite resource, which it is, because we do use it for all sorts of things, from position navigation, timing, climate change, like all this stuff. So it's a finite resource where we put these satellites, and it's an environment in and of itself that should be regarded just like land, air, and ocean. There should be land, air, ocean, and space. And so this idea of trying to understand the space environment as an additional ecosystem, as a finite resource, and our need to protect it if we want to keep on being able to utilize it long term.
Yeah. How do you feel, having been talking and thinking about this and working on it for so many years? And I'm sure, maybe in those earlier years, it was kind of like yelling into the void. How does it make you feel that there's definitely an influx of attention, at least, let's say, to this issue? I would say that of my family and friends who are not in the space bubble, I think I would say that the majority of them are probably aware of the issue of, orbital debris. What are your thoughts on just the attention? Does it feel like vindication? Is it too little, too late?
So I'm actually very happy to see that more and more people are aware of this. And like you said, your family and friends know about, space debris and that sort of stuff. I mean, that's amazing. it makes me smile large every time I hear that, because yeah, it means that maybe some of what I'm doing is certainly registering with folks. And as you said, I felt early on, it very much felt like a don't look up type scenario for me, because I kept on telling people about, yeah, please look up. And again, it was just, there was a lack of empathy, for the problem. And there still is some, but again, I think, from an optimism perspective, I think it's starting to catch on. I mean, my goal is really to make this a mainstream thing. So to go outside the space bubbles. So yeah, I feel very happy with the level of awareness that is slowly growing. But the thing is, it needs to really become mainstream and scale. And so, opportunities to speak to you through these sorts of venues, helps that tremendously.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's quite the multidisciplinary task then, right? As in your own words, when we spoke in the fall, I think you said recruiting empathy beyond, the technical or scientific or sort of in-group of space. And on the topic of, being interdisciplinary, this is one, it strikes me that there's parallels between the potential, cascading effects of congestion, collisions in low Earth orbit, and climate change, and the concept of feedback loops. Do you think about that at all? Is that a
big time
a good connection to draw?
Yeah. So the thing is, interestingly enough, several decades ago, there's some Russian scientists that came up with this concept called correlation Pleiades, and it was mostly for biological systems. And the idea of so Pleiades, as you know, is right, this Greek mythology, bunch of sisters, I think 7 of them, kind of stuff. But then also, one of the constellations is the Pleiades as well. So really the use of the word Pleiades is just to indicate a cluster of stuff. And the idea of the correlation Pleiades was these Russian scientists hypothesized that if we looked at like the whole body as a system of systems and measured the different ways that each system evolves and how it generates cells and all this other stuff, we may find that there are interdependencies, there are correlations between one system and the next, which intuitively makes sense. A very long-winded way to answer you, but this is all to say that I believe, I'm going to call it Gaia, the Earth, you're right? It's like as a system of systems. Sure. And say, I believe, my hypothesis is that if we were able to aggregate data from land, human-based activity, all these things, oceans, air, and space, we would, if we linked these 4 things together and studied them as a system of systems with the intent to try to discover these correlation Pleiades of this Gaia system, my guess is that we're going to find interdependencies and see, look, yeah, this thing that's happening on land is connected to this other process happening in the ocean. And we see 18 hours later that in space, blah, blah, blah happens. Like we would know so much more about ourselves if we approached it, from that lens.
Well, I think that the motif or theme of interlinkages between a lot of these concepts, that will be, a recurring point here in this conversation. So rather than me sort of bumble through an explanation, you told me when we last spoke, and I'm quoting, what really dominates our perception of risk is the uncertainty. And you've touched on that, but I want to get a little bit more into that about risk assessment, forecasting, probabilities, and everything, because I know that you've done a lot of really important work there.
Yeah. So this is going to definitely, I love talking about this, and it's, it has a good philosophical feel to it. But I think in general, a way that I like to look at this is there's stuff happening in the universe that we care about, presumably, and the only way to know about it is to measure it. And so we try to take measurements of the stuff Usually we can't measure it in its entirety. We can only measure samples of the stuff that we believe that we're interested in. But the output from those measurements are data. The data at first seem to be like haphazard and whatnot. But when we pay more attention to this evidence, to the data, to the evidence, we see that there are patterns in the data, that there's structure in the data. The structure in the data are things that allow us to then draw conclusions and make models or have beliefs or hypotheses about the thing that was supposedly observed. And then those models and hypotheses let us predict what future data, what future evidence is going to look like. And the difference between what the future evidence is and what our predictions are constitutes what I call statistical surprisal, meaning if we know the thing that we're interested in exactly, uber precise, uber accurate, we know it without any sort of uncertainty, that means that the next time that we collect evidence, we will predict the evidence exactly. And if we can predict the evidence exactly, there's no surprise. It's a boring universe because there's nothing to learn because we know it already. So this whole cycle that I described, aside from, you can label it as scientific method, is going from, it's the union of statistics and probability. Statistics being the quantifying of the data and the evidence, and then from that generating models and hypotheses, and the probabilistic aspect is then the predictive nature of this to try to quantify this surprisal. Now, getting to this idea of risk, one of the things that Rudolf Emil Kalman, the co-inventor of the Kalman filter, kind of paraphrased was that inexact data cannot yield exact models unless we apply prejudice to get rid of the inherent uncertainty. And this is the thing that I see people do a lot, unfortunately, is uncertainty feels uncomfortable. We don't like uncertainty. It feels uncomfortable. And the other thing, too, is when we give up on learning, we just say that's random. So the thing that I want to, I guess, to the audience and whatnot, is to then also say, when it comes to uncertainty, there's really two types of uncertainty in the camp of uncertainty quantification people formally. There's aleatory uncertainty, which is uncertainty that's due to randomness. And then there's epistemic uncertainty, which is uncertainty that's due to systematic or effects or even ignorance. And the thing that I want to let people know is you can't know something better than its inherent randomness. So if something is really random, you can't learn more about it. That's it. That is the best that you can do, is reduce the uncertainty to the randomness, because it's by definition random. So you can't know it anymore. And so in my own work, I'm always trying to find ways to gather more evidence to remove my ignorance. And I'm very reluctant to call something random, because as soon as I say, oh, that's random, then I'm pretty much giving up on learning, because you can't know more. And so what I do is I try to embrace my ignorance and say, I'm ignorant of a lot of things. And if I can use evidence to remove my ignorance, just like a refrigerator doesn't cool, it removes heat. The cooling is an effect of heat removal. I approach knowledge as a removal of ignorance. As I can remove my ignorance, I get to know more.
I'm just skimming the surface here, but a few of my takeaways are what gets measured gets managed. That this concept, it's more of a, I suppose, machine learning, but garbage in, garbage out. And then, and again, I'm like really just abstracting away the complexity and the intellectual beauty of what you said, but I'm doing my best to keep up. So, and moving right along on this sort of intellectual conversation toward a force, I want to address the the geopolitical or international relations aspects of this. One, because, that aligns perfectly with my interest. I got a degree in that from UT. But two, this, of course, is sort of your textbook 101 case of international relations. There's collective action, there's and econ, I suppose, very multidisciplinary. There's externalities, there's strategy of the commons, multilateral coordination. And as you said at the top of the show, you work with a lot of the international institutions as well as national players who are key decision makers in this. And so I want to ask, and we are of course going to get on to your work at Privateer and sort of industry efforts in the second half of the show. But I want to ask about the government aspect of this, and what level of responsibility governments, as I suppose like national atomic units or maybe supranational institutions, like what responsibility they bear for the issue of orbital debris and managing the commons.
So I'll say this, right? Because even though I kind of wax lyrical with the uncertainty stuff, this is where I'm going to kind of touch really on the risk thing that you brought up. Because we make decisions based on our level of knowledge, and that is mired in uncertainty. But when it comes to the governments, I think there's a mixed bag in the sense that the Outer Space Treaty of 1972 basically puts the responsibility on states party to the treaty with their governments in terms of liability and damage and all this, providing authorization and continuing supervision of space activities, blah, blah, blah. So, governments are responsible for any damage or any harmful interference that any space object poses on anything else. And at the same time, there's so much ambiguity, not just in the language of the treaties and their interpretation, but the evidence of what constitutes damage and harmful interference. And so, most of the debris that exists, we don't know where it came from specifically, and because we don't know that, then it's like there's no government responsible for the majority of the debris. The stuff that is trackable, like in the U.S. Department of Defense's catalog and that sort of stuff, those things by and large do have a country that is associated with some of these things, the rocket bodies, that sort of thing. And so that can be then attributed to a given country and say, you're really responsible for, just like with the Chinese Long March kind of thing, right? It's like, that's clearly Chinese responsibility. But then again, it's back to, what constitutes harmful interference and damage. And I can tell you from my perspective, spinning up the planet Earth, not knowing where a school bus sized object is going to land, to me, that constitutes harmful interference and damage. I'm sorry. Like, to me, but in order for that to sort of stick, people are saying, oh, well, we need more laws in space. I think we need to use what we have, but we actually need to use them. We need to flex the legal muscles, and people need to actually go to the United Nations and say, I'm filing a complaint against this country because I feel that harm has been done to me because of this country's activities. And until that happens, we're just not going to move the needle on this, man.
Law, liability. I mean, we really are hitting everything. We'll continue, but we're going to take a really quick break. Time for a short break to hear about our sponsors again. Space is the new frontier for cybersecurity. SpiderOak Mission Systems builds space cybersecurity solutions for civilian, military, and commercial space operations. Their Orbit Secure protocol delivers zero trust security to zero gravity environments, protecting space communication, command, control, data transmission, storage, and integrity at the data level. To learn more about how zero trust architectures will revolutionize security in new space, download the new NSR SpiderOak sponsored whitepaper titled Space Cybersecurity, Current State and Future Needs. You can find that whitepaper at spacecyber.com, and that's spacecyber.com, easy link to remember. Or check out their website at spideroak-ms.com and tell them Pathfinder sent you. All right, we're back, and there's three of us. Ryder's just going to make a quick cameo, but he's been a very good boy, so I had to show him some love. Now, to make the seamless transition between dog sitting and probabilistic forecasting, if you will, this question comes by way of Rachel Zisk, Payload's lead reporter. She's done a lot of excellent longer form writing on orbital debris that I'll link to in the show notes. But for our purposes, here are her questions. What is the carrying capacity of LEO? Does such a thing exist? And why is it difficult to ascertain an estimate of how many objects can be in LEO at once?
Yeah, so I like this question quite a bit. And the way that I like to think about the orbital carrying capacity, and, I had mentioned this earlier that, near Earth space is a finite resource. We only put objects, satellites in very specific orbital highways and that sort of stuff. So just like there's a concept of carrying capacity for an ecosystem, carrying capacity for a highway, there's carrying capacity for an orbital highway. And the way to think about when does this capacity look like it's saturated, when does it look like it's exceeded, I like to start there. And the carrying capacity is saturated or exceeded when our decisions and actions can no longer prevent some percentage of undesirable outcomes from happening. So if we want to prevent things in sun-synchronous orbit from colliding with each other, and it doesn't matter what we decide or what actions we take, we can't prevent those things from happening, then by all intents and purposes, the carrying capacity of the orbit has been exceeded or saturated. So that's all to say that it's not just the number of objects, but it's the uncertainty with which we understand where they're at and where they're going to go. So this uncertainty thing is coming back in to rear its head, so to speak. And in order for us to know what the carrying capacity is for LEO, we as a global community would have to decide on what are those undesirable outcomes that we're trying to prevent with our decisions and actions. And at what point, where do we set the threshold for this is no longer tolerable? And so that's the main reason why this orbital carrying capacity has not really been quantified yet, is because we haven't come to an agreement on what those undesirable outcomes are. I mean, collisions are an obvious one, but there's probably more than that. I mean, from ground-based astronomers, they'd probably say light pollution, is one of those. So.
Yeah, and I would imagine that it's not as simple as just coming up with a rudimentary equation. Follow on to that, what are the stakes of not protecting the orbital environment? Some think we risk cutting off our access to space for decades, indefinitely, or at least in our lifetimes. What are your thoughts here? Where do you fall on this?
So I think part of it is, if capacity is saturated, basically losing the ability to utilize space sustainably for whatever purposes humanity has, whether it's to provide services and capabilities that satellites uniquely provide, like climate change, Earth observation, communications, internet, to the ability to actually do space exploration. People keep on talking about space tourism, and I have friends, people that I call friends, that have already gone up on the Blue Origin rides and that sort of stuff. And unlike getting on a plane, when you get on the plane, you hear the safety briefing. They talk about depressurization and the oxygen mask and the live vests. What they don't mention on planes is unpredictable bullets piercing the hull of the aircraft.
Yeah.
But that's what people are basically facing right now going into space, and it's not going to get better. And so I think the other risk, right, is that human lives are lost as a consequence of all the debris and all that other stuff. Not to say, even things re-entering with the Chinese rocket body.
Well, not an easy way here to make this transition, but I do want to move on to industry. It should come as no surprise to anyone listening to this when I say that what was once monopolized by the state, rocket launches, satellite operations, et cetera, is now very much a public-private affair. There's a lot of private sector activity. Nation states are obviously still very important on the civil and military side. And I would argue still in the driver's seat. And, there's the third leg of the stool where, of course, there's academia to do all the basic and advanced research and lay the groundwork for all of this. All this is a winding way to introduce privateer into the conversation and just touch on what privateer is building and where it sort of sits within the, ecosystem of players in space from public to private.
Yeah, so I would say privateer, by and large, is a platform company where, so we see that humanity faces some wicked problems, some regarding space that we've talked about, the environmentalism and sustainability. And, when I travel and speak to people all around the globe, there's no shortage of folks that are very enthusiastic, smart, very smart people from all walks of life that have ideas about how to bring solutions to the table. But the barrier to them being able to provide solutions is access to data and information. And so I think the core of what Privateer is trying to do is to say, we want to enable humanity to be able to bring solutions to the table where otherwise they weren't able to do that. And let's give most of humanity access to data and information and let people just come up with really cool ideas. Maybe, somebody in their garage in Sacramento, maybe an indigenous person somewhere in the bush in Australia has a pretty cool idea, but they just need access to data and information. And so this idea of bringing developers onto a platform, just like iPhone's a platform, Privateer, we're going to have our own apps like Mail, like Safari, but some people like Chrome, some people like Outlook. So that's what we want to do, man, is just have the platform, have our own apps that deliver some interesting services, but it's mostly to bring in and enable most of everybody else to come up with really cool solutions for things we haven't even been able to dream of.
Interesting. I see how that could tie in, if you're successful, that could tie into that concept of recruiting empathy from a broader set of people. Backing up a little bit, who are the three amigos? You're one of the three amigos. Who are the other two amigos?
Yeah, so we have Alex Fielding, who's the CEO and chairman of Privateer, and he was very successful in other ventures, including Ripcord. And then we have, Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple, as the third amigo as well.
So when I go to your homepage, you have a near real-time, I presume, catalog of objects in space. And I presume, that gives a small window into what you're going to continue to build. So I want to hear, where are you pulling this data from? And then second part to this question is, what is unique or new about Privateer's tech stack?
So, what you basically come onto in the Privateer website is what we call Wayfinder. And the whole idea of Wayfinder, from indigenous cultures, definitely, Hawaiian, is this idea of being able to navigate through, the oceans, but definitely through life in general, by having a successful conversation with the environment. So that's what we want. We want to get across to people is that the way for humanity to find its path, beyond these wicked problems is to embrace stewardship and is to basically have a successful conversation with the environment. And so Wayfinder is basically the entree into that, where, like you said, we have opinions about stuff in space. Some of those opinions come from the Department of Defense. Others come from Russia. Others come from satellite owner operators. Some come from amateur telescope community people, different databases and registries. So it's like, can we aggregate all these different sources? For now, we're just showing all the opinions. But the next step is really to start reconciling this, kind of like, Waze. So Waze as a traffic app is a participatory sensing network in which the users of Waze can actually be participants in providing information and data that everybody else that's a Waze user can benefit from. And that's what we want to do. We want Wayfinder in one or more ways to be like a Waze for space, in that people that make use of it for safety and access and all this other stuff to space can also contribute their opinions, and that can benefit the rest of the community. So that's one of the places that we're taking this. Also, we want it to be a lot like Zillow, in the sense of, if you own satellites and you have extra information, you can like claim your satellite and provide that in a way that could benefit the rest of the community as well. So that's kind of what we're thinking about with Wayfinder as kind of this entree. And in terms of like, innovation and the tech stack and all that, is really leveraging this idea of knowledge graphs, in that what we want to create a big data problem for ourselves, because if we can bring in, and specifically when I say big data, I mean massive quantities of very different and disparate sources of information. And if we can aggregate all these things and curate it in a way that makes it easy to query, we want to see, have we unknowingly measured something in the aggregated data set? Like, do all these different sets of data provide us insight that we couldn't get from any given source by itself, so that we can really open this up to a wide variety of inquiries?
So this is an interesting aggregation play. And not to get too into the weeds, but I presume, part and parcel of Privateer's quest is tearing down sort of silos and trying to make this data and this information more interoperable.
Absolutely. And the thing is, we had brought up geopolitics, before. If you look at the news cycles, there's a lot of he said, she said. The United States is saying, oh, well, China is trying to do this. Russia is like spying on my stuff. Russia is saying the US is doing blah, 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 so on and so forth. But everybody is saying these things and nobody's providing evidence. And so to me, the thing that I'm trying to push forward is nothing hides in space. That's my goal. My goal, amongst many things, is for nothing to hide. And I want the evidence to be as ubiquitous, as easily accessible as possible, so that people can't start just throwing out accusations of this, that, and the other without an ability to actually, confirm or refute any of these things. So to me, deterrence from people doing things that they shouldn't be doing in space, because look, space as another domain of human activity is not foreign to actual threats. Everywhere else, humanity has acted with malicious intent and behavior. Space is no different. It's not this big kumbaya kind of thing where we all get along, unfortunately. And so, but we need to basically make the evidence, more openly accessible.
Right. So transparency is key here.
Absolutely. It's critical.
Would you describe Privateer's work in a way as operationalizing or maybe productizing a lot of your past body of work and your experience and, this knowledge?
Yeah, I would say exactly that. Basically, Astrograph, which I developed at UT with government funding, that got commercialized. I mean, Astrograph still exists and it always will, but, snap of the chalk line of Astrograph got, transitioned successfully to Privateer for it to be commercialized and productized, and some other ideas in terms of streaming messaging for the orbital safety services and that sort of stuff as well. So yeah, a lot of the work that I've been doing, including characterizing objects in terms of like size, shape, material properties for a variety of reasons, all those things are being transitioned to be commercialized and productized at Privateer, because the work that I've done has been, it's like it demonstrates capability, but it's in a research environment in academia, and it just doesn't scale, and it can't be like 24/7. And so that's where private industry, specifically Privateer, comes into play.
I see. So we talked a little bit about the supply, and I think the crowdfunding, or sorry, participatory, crowd sourcing element to this is very interesting. What about demand? Who do you think that your big customers or maybe power users of the platform will be?
Yeah, so I would say this, right? I mean, and the other thing that I didn't throw into the mix are our own satellites that will be collecting data and feeding into this as well.
That was my next question.
Yeah,
that was my next question.
Yeah, so because it's good to have your own sources of information to add to confirm or refute beliefs and hypotheses. So I would say, in terms of making space, safer, more secure, and sustainable, for sure, people that are operating satellites that want to protect their investment and that sort of thing are going to be, potential customers. Governments that are legally liable for damage and all that other stuff are going to want to get some of these as well. And I would even say space insurance companies and that sort of stuff, which is going to develop, they're going to be very interested in this as well. And out of the satellite owner operators, people that want to start getting deeper into in-space servicing, assembly, and manufacturing. So it's not just people that have like Starlinks with the internet and the communications, but people that actually want to start developing the business of going to something, either removing it, servicing it, recycling it. They have a need for information that currently doesn't exist to help support their decision-making processes. They're going to be interested in this stuff as well.
Like I said, you answered my next question about, operating your own assets, but I do want to actually continue on this thread of buy versus build. What parts of the stack are you outsourcing or just like buying off the shelf? That might be too simplistic, but I think you see where I'm going.
One of the things that, for sure Alex believes in is avoiding reinventing wheels. So, he's already reached out to a whole host of other companies that have really credible and advanced and mature capabilities to be partners with Privateer and what we're trying to do and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I mean, as much as possible, we're doing that. And even, where possible, just having our sensors on other people's satellites as well.
Yeah.
So we're looking at all that.
A rising tide lifts all boats.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. And while we're on the topic of a rising tide and lifting all boats, I said we'd find some reasons to be optimistic in this conversation. So it would behoove us to touch on them. And this is a broad question, what excites you about the future of Privateer first? And then second, the second one's going to get a lot more broad. What positive trends or momentum you're seeing, and it could be on anything we've touched about, norms, national policies, laws or rules being promulgated, public advocacy, grassroots activism, could be on anything, but separating them into the two.
Yeah.
And just sort of a future, on the first part, a future outlook on Privateer and what really excites you to wake up every day and go to work.
So I will say this. To me, the biggest obstacle to creating solutions to these problems is lack of empathy, because on the policy side, we have ideas. On the technical side, we have ideas, but it's the empathy that's required. And by empathy, I mean people's ability to project themselves into different perspectives and kind of get a sense of these sorts of things, right? Because I think people tend to say that's not my problem, it's space and these sorts of things. And so the thing that excites me with Privateer is that with our platform and everything else that we're doing, because I'm also trying to get into like TV, film, media, and these sorts of things to make this more mainstream, is if we can show humanity evidence of interconnectedness, people will be more reluctant to say that's not my problem, because they'll be like, yeah, it is my problem. I see how it is my problem. Even if there's some consequence that I can escape in my lifetime, my family and those that follow me, my children or children's children or whatever, will not be able to escape this. So I think and I'm going to assume that Privateer will be able to have a significant role in showing humanity the interconnectedness between these things. And we talked about the system of systems and that sort of stuff. That is what excites me the most, because to me, once we do that, it's going to be very difficult to not recruit empathy from people. And I think the second topic is I do see that the next generation is more cognizant of the interconnectedness of things, and very much rolling up their sleeves to be activists and not tolerating this kind of status quo and lethargy and apathy type stuff. And so I'm very excited at the youth and being able to basically give them a platform to just come up with really cool ideas and solutions to some of these problems.
Yeah. You would have all the reasons in the world, I would think, to be a jaded realist, but you don't strike me as a realist. And this is kind of, getting into the weeds of international relations. What am I right on that? And why is that? Goes against the grain.
So here's the thing, man. It's like, during my travels, to some extent, I consider myself kind of like a Tony Bourdain of space.
I love that.
So in fact, I'm working on developing a show with the working titles like Shifted Space, where I would be like Tony Bourdain, but basically going across the globe and having real rough and raw conversations with people. And I can tell you that from my interactions with folks, humans, we're all connected. We all 99 point whatever %, we're all similar. The differences are like, on the nth digit, kind of after the decimal and stuff, in terms of like our DNA. And so when I talk to people, man, we all have families. We all kind of love our children, even though we have different cultural beliefs and that sort of stuff. In general, we want harmony. We don't want conflict. And I think that just being able to listen to people, and again, being empathetic, right? When I project myself, when I go to Israel or Australia or wherever it is that I'm going, and I'm sitting with people of different cultures, and in conversations with them, I allow myself to project myself into their perspectives just for an instant. There's a connection there, and there's a desire to do stuff together, and that is the seed of my belief. I have evidence of that. And I think that at the government levels, we kind of tote party lines and all these other things. But at the human connection, we're in the same room kind of stuff, I think there's more potential for harmony than the lack of that. And so that's my stronghold.
I think I would just add, because I don't want to gloss over, I think that it's really powerful that you, sort of draw inspiration from indigenous societies, because a lot of the times they don't really have a seat at the table, so to speak. And then also traveling around the world and having these conversations. But I also appreciate you calling out the intergenerational aspect of this, because if the unthinkable or some of the more dire possible futures come to bear, then all of these new countries that are trying to access space with, new space programs, like, they risk losing it before they even get going. And the same, could be said about future generations or your younger generations. And, this goes back to the parallels between space sustainability and climate change. So yeah, I think that's a good upbeat note to end the substantive part of the show on. I have a few quick lighter questions that I want to ask you. That's all right.
Yeah.
If you weren't in your line of business, and I think we've already established that your line of business is like 20 million different things, but broadly speaking, if you weren't in your line of business, what would you be doing?
I want to be helpful to people, man. I mean, that's the bottom line. And one of the things that I thought about is, if I weren't doing this, is there something else that I'd kind of gravitate towards? Because I consider myself a data renaissance, a knowledge sculptor. This idea of aggregating data and information to come up with insights that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. I would love to get into the business of wearable technology, like the Aura Ring, Apple Watch, all that stuff.
Look, I have three of them on me.
Yeah, right. And it's like, I even did the whole, glucose monitor kind of thing for a while. And
that's what I have
exactly. Right. And so bringing in all these, because if you want to know something, you have to measure it. If you want to understand something, you have to predict it. That's the model that I give to my own students in my research program. I would want to bring in all these wearable technologies and interface that with people's ability to journal and log things, and basically say, I want to come up with something that's tailored for each individual, because everybody has, it's their own metabolism, the way that they react to foods and this, that, or the other, and basically provide people a window to help them understand themselves better, to understand what seems to be things that are beneficial to them or harmful to them, to help them out, to figure themselves out, kind of stuff, to improve everybody's quality of life.
I think we see eye to eye on that, and like the power, the potential of personalized medicine. And I've thought to myself, I would never have the capability of building this, but like an operating system for like fitness and health and really being in tune. Wow. We'll have to riff on that at a later day. But last question, because we're both in Austin, we're across town, probably a couple of miles from each other. What are your favorite taco spots here? Do you like tacos?
Well, so here's the thing. There's a place called Carbs Me Out, because I'm on this whole kind of keto thing. Been on that for like 3 years. Okay. So Carbs Me Out has like some awesome burritos. And so that's like my favorite thing, is anything that's like a keto taco or burrito. Like, I'm favorable to that. But I would say even beyond that, man, there's a place close to the university called Hot Fields. It's like a French. Yeah. That's, if I'm not in my office, man, and I'm not in my in my townhouse, then I'm probably at Hot Fields, chilling. So
awesome. Well, hopefully folks in Austin will check out those spots, because they both sound great. Moriba, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks a lot, brother. I'm glad to be back.
Okay, folks, that will do it for Pathfinder 0011. My brain is still spinning, so frankly, I don't have a succinct or clever way to wrap this up, but I hope you learned something from this conversation. I know that I did. If you like what you heard, leave us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening to this. Ryder already has. And as always, reach out to me at ryan@payloadspace.com with any feedback or constructive criticism. That will do it for today. I'm Ryan Duffy signing off, and I'll see you back here next week.